You might think you know what cruelty looks like, but I guarantee you haven't seen anything like what happened to me. Not from someone who is supposed to be family. Listen to this. I was lying on the floor, on the expensive Persian rug my mother insisted on having, clutching my recently operated on knee, and all I could hear was the booming laughter of my entire extended family. Why was I on the floor? Because my own sister, in front of 70 people celebrating my dad's 60th birthday, had just snatched my crutch out of my hand with such force that it completely threw off my balance, sending me down with a sickening thud that jarred every bone in my leg. And as I lay there, trying not to scream from the pain radiating from my surgical incision, she stood over me, her face contorted into this ugly mask of self-righteous fury, and sneered, "Stop faking it. You're just leeching off Mom and Dad's sympathy and money. Get up, you pathetic liar." And everyone laughed. They all laughed. My blood ran cold, not just from the pain, but from the realization of how truly alone I was in that room, surrounded by people who were supposed to love me. Was I wrong for the way I handled the sheer, cold humiliation that followed? Tell me, after you hear the whole story, if you would have done the exact same thing to put her in her place, to really understand why my sister Sarah felt she had the right to publicly assault me. You have to know the history of our family and this ridiculous underlying current of competition that's always existed between us, mostly fueled by my parents' well-meaning, but ultimately disastrous habit of comparing their children. Sarah is the golden child, the one who does everything right. She's 5 years older than me, married to a successful lawyer, lives in a stunning house in the suburbs, and has 2 perfect, quiet children. She's the one who is always lauded for her strong will and no-nonsense attitude. I, on the other hand, was always the dreamer, the sensitive one, and, to be frank, the perpetual screw-up in her eyes. I took a gap year, went to art school, and I've been working as a freelance graphic designer, which, according to Sarah, is just a fancy way of saying I'm unemployed and waiting for handouts. This professional difference was the root of her resentment. She was convinced I was less successful because I was less hardworking, and that any setback I experienced was simply a manufactured cry for attention. The reason I was on crutches was genuine and serious. About 3 months ago, I was in a terrible skiing accident during a trip with friends. I tore my anterior cruciate ligament, my medial collateral ligament, and my meniscus. It was a complete disaster. The surgeon said it was one of the worst triple tears he had seen. I had to undergo a lengthy, invasive reconstructive surgery. The recovery was brutal. Weeks of non-weight bearing restriction, intense physical therapy that felt like torture, and a lot of pain medication. I had to move back home with my parents temporarily because I couldn't manage the stairs in my own apartment, and I needed help with basic tasks. My parents, bless their hearts, were incredibly supportive. My mother cooked, my father drove me to physical therapy, and they paid for the initial medical bills not covered by my insurance, promising me I could pay them back when I was on my feet again. This is where Sarah's vitriol began to bubble over. She saw my dependency not as a temporary medical necessity, but as confirmation of her belief that I was a leech. She kept saying things like, "It's so convenient that you're hurt right when Mom and Dad got their end-of-year bonus. Or you really need 2 weeks off work just because of a little knee scrape. Some of us have real jobs." Every interaction was a passive-aggressive jab at my legitimacy, my work ethic, and, most cruelly, the authenticity of my injury. The day of my dad's birthday party arrived. It was a huge affair, a catered celebration at a local venue, and I knew I had to attend, even if just to show my support for my father. I dressed carefully, trying to look presentable despite the massive, restrictive brace on my leg and the crutches I relied on for every single movement. I tried to stay out of the way, finding a quiet chair near the wall. Sarah, however, seemed determined to seek me out and make a show of her disapproval. She kept giving me these long, pitying stares that weren't pitying at all. They were judgmental. Then, when the birthday cake was being brought out, and everyone was gathered around the table, singing, I was slowly trying to navigate my way to a better vantage point. This was her moment. I was momentarily distracted, trying to keep my balance as people shuffled past me, and that's when she struck. She walked straight up to me, her smile wiped clean, and in a voice loud enough for the 20 closest people to hear, she said, "Oh, look at Mr. Invalid here, blocking the walkway. Can't you put on a brave face just for one night? You've been using those things for months. It's pathetic. Anyone can see you're just milking it." And before I could even formulate a response, she reached out, a swift, practiced motion, and snatched the aluminum crutch from my left hand. I tried to compensate, but the weight was too much for my right leg to manage, especially with my center of gravity off. I felt the sickening lurch, the total loss of control, and then I was falling, my operated knee slamming into the hard floor. The sound of the fall was instantly swallowed by the laughter. My uncle started to clap, and one of my cousins said, finally, "Tough love, Sarah." I couldn't breathe. The pain was immediate and excruciating, sharp enough to make my vision swim. I just lay there, paralyzed by the physical pain and the sheer, overwhelming betrayal from my family. Sarah, standing over me, then snapped my crutch in half across her knee, a theatrical display of cruelty, and let the pieces clatter next to me. "Now, get up, you faker," she hissed. So, that's the situation I was in. Laid out like a fool, hurt, humiliated, and betrayed by my own sister, with the rest of my family openly endorsing her cruelty. My mind was racing between the blinding pain and the burning, cold fury. I was thinking, this is it. This is the moment I become the family pariah, or I fight back. The rage in me was something I had never felt before, a primal, protective instinct. My sister was a monster, and my family were her complicit audience, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, what I did, and who came to my rescue, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have tried to crawl away? Or would you have done everything in your power to make your sister regret every single one of her cruel, calculated choices? Tell me what you would have done before you hear the end of this story. As I was struggling to push myself up, gripping the edge of a nearby chair, a heavy silence suddenly fell over the crowd. The laughter stopped, and the room went completely still. I looked up, bewildered, to see all the faces turned away from me and towards the main doorway of the banquet hall. And that's when I saw him, walking with a deliberate, slow, and imposing stride, was Dr. Elias Vance, my orthopedic surgeon. Dr. Vance is a man who exudes quiet authority, tall, silver-haired, with the piercing, serious eyes of a man who holds people's mobility in his hands. He was there because my mother, in her anxiousness, had invited him as a thank you gesture. She'd completely forgotten to tell me he was attending. He had been standing just behind the main group, waiting for a moment to greet my parents, and had witnessed the entire scene. He walked past the stunned relatives and straight up to Sarah, who, to her credit, was still standing there, arms crossed, looking smugly down at me. Dr. Vance didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He simply reached out and gently placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, resonant, and utterly terrifying in its quiet intensity. "Ma'am," he said, and I could feel the blood draining from Sarah's face as she finally recognized him. "I am Dr. Vance. I performed a 10-hour-long triple ligament reconstruction on this young man's leg 3 months ago. I personally fused 3 major tendons back into his knee joint using grafts." He squeezed her shoulder just slightly. "Do you understand what that means? It means his leg, right now, is held together by surgical thread and scar tissue that is still healing. It means he is absolutely, medically required to use those crutches." He paused, letting the silence draw out. Then he looked down at the broken crutch lying on the floor and back at Sarah. "What you just did." He continued, the quiet force of his words cutting through the air like a knife, was not only an act of appalling cruelty, but a potentially criminal act of battery. If you have undone my surgery, if you have caused a re-tear or worse, damaged the graft, you will be liable for the cost of a complete repeat surgery, which starts at $70,000, and you will have permanently compromised your brother's ability to walk without a limp for the rest of his life. The color left Sarah's face entirely. She looked sick. My father, who had been frozen in shock, finally rushed forward. Doctor. Vance immediately waved him off, knelt down beside me with professional ease, and began a terrifyingly thorough examination, ignoring everyone. He gently lifted my leg, looking for swelling and checking the stability of the joint. Can you move your toes? Can you feel this pressure? He asked, his focus entirely on me. Meanwhile, the party was completely dead. No one was laughing. My relatives were whispering, horrified by the mention of a potential $70,000 bill and the threat of criminal charges. The aftermath was a glorious, albeit painful, spectacle, Doctor. Vance determined that I had thankfully not caused a catastrophic re-tear, but I had severely aggravated the site, and he ordered me immediately to the hospital for an MRI to be absolutely sure. Before he helped my father carefully carry me out to his car, he stood up and addressed the room again. He pointed a finger directly at Sarah, whose eyes were wide with a terror she richly deserved. You will contact my office tomorrow, he commanded. You will pay for a new, specialized crutch. You will pay for this emergency MRI. And you will pay for all the physical therapy required to make up for this severe setback. Do you understand me? Sarah could only nod, mute, defeated, and exposed. My parents, finally seeing the monstrous extent of Sarah's resentment, were shattered. The drive to the hospital was silent, punctuated only by my father's quiet apologies. The MRI confirmed a major strain and significant swelling, setting my recovery back by at least 4 weeks, which Dr. Vance made sure to document meticulously. The next day, Sarah called me not to apologize, but to ask for the hospital's billing information, her voice brittle with forced civility. The fallout in the family was immense. My parents cut off Sarah's allowance, something she was still getting despite her successful husband, and openly called her out for her jealousy and malice. My father said he was ashamed of her. The relatives who had laughed were quick to disappear or offer mumbled apologies, completely unwilling to be associated with her after the very public, very expensive display of cruelty. I eventually healed, though the experience left a scar deeper than the one on my knee. Sarah paid for everything begrudgingly, but the public humiliation and the threat of severe financial ruin and criminal action were the only consequences she understood. She was finally stripped of her status as the untouchable golden child. The story became family legend, and not in a way that glorified her. It taught me a vital lesson. True strength isn't about being able to stand on 2 feet, but about having the inner fortitude to stand up for yourself when others try to break you. So, here's my final thought. You can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family, and sometimes the best choice is to let the consequences of their own cruelty do the talking for you. Like this video if you were absolutely on my side and think Sarah got exactly what she deserved. Subscribe for more stories like this, where the entitled get a harsh dose of reality. And please share your final thoughts on this whole mess and tell me if Dr. Vance was the hero of the day in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.